Nobody is clear where Doval begins and where Jaishankar ends, or the other way around. But more and more it is clear that Jaishankar is the mouthpiece and in some ways in the neighborhood and outside.
China is something again where Mr. Doval is the special representative, and he's the longest serving special representative of the Prime Minister, whether from the Chinese side, whether from Chinese side or from the Indian side. There's been nobody who has served as a special representative for such a long time.
This government has provided no direct proof or named anybody involved in the attack. We don't know the modalities, we don't know how it was carried out. If Pakistan is to blame, how was it responsible for this attack? That's the nitty-gritty that comes directly under Doval.
A European country which India considers as a strategic partner, one of their diplomats actually told me, because I thought that Europe etc. would be handled by the MEA, they said no, even we know that even Europe is handled more by the NSA's office than by the External Affairs Minister.
You see the coming together of rhetoric, ghar mein jaake marenge, both Doval and Modi are the only two people saying this. And you see the consequences of doing this nonsense. Eventually, it achieved nothing. You were going after, forget the whole ethical perspective on this. Look at it only from a security viewpoint. What were you hoping to gain?
He was born when even Second World War was going on. He's 80-year-old. RSS talks about 75, as you said. So how long will he continue in this post, and who can he replace with? Are there no replacements? Is there no one Mr. Modi trusts to replace Mr. Doval? Hello and welcome to the Caravan Long View. I am Sushant Singh.
I am Hartosh Singh.
So this week, US President Donald Trump spoke about the India-Pakistan clash once again. This must be the 25th or 26th time that he has spoken about the clash. He has taken credit for what has been done. But most stunningly, he actually went out and said that either 4 or 5, and he thought 5 fighter jets were brought down during the conflict, and that's why it made the conflict so serious. This is the first time actually somebody of his stature, of his leadership, had actually gone and claimed that these aircraft went down, these fighter jets went down. And like most people believe that he's talking about the Indian Air Force's fighter jets, 5 of them, which supposedly went down on the first night, on the night of 7th May. Now, this is very interesting because the Indian government, particularly the Prime Minister and the political leadership, have been completely silent about it. Although the military leadership has spoken about it, whether it is the Deputy Chief of Air Operations or whether it is the CDS or others, they have spoken about it, but the political leadership has been particularly silent about it. There are 2 things which are noteworthy here. If these aircraft were lost, this is the maximum number of aircraft the Indian Air Force has lost after the 1971 war. It has never lost so many fighter jets on one night. And the second thing which is interesting is what the defense attaché to Jakarta, the Indian defense attaché to Jakarta, actually said. He said that this happened because there were political directions not to target air defense of Pakistani military bases. And Pakistan, however, decided to take out these aircraft which were flying in the Indian airspace that night and brought them down. And the second interesting thing is that, and the controversy around what External Affairs Minister Jaishankar spoke about, that he tried to convey as if they had told Pakistan and then hit them, and on that there was a controversy with the Congress party. And then it eventually emerged that it was on the morning after these attacks that India had gone out and said that we should call it quits and there should be a ceasefire at that point in time. Now this is very interesting. If India had lost 5 aircraft that night and Pakistan had only been hit in some civilian places, so-called terror targets, India still decided to go and tell Pakistan that we should call it quits in the morning, rather than avenging the loss of those five fighter jets. So this was a very interesting facet, and which, with President Trump coming in, has become even more significant and more important. And Hartosh, I believe you have very strong views on this.
Well, Sushant, one of the things, because there's a lot of focus on the military side of this conflict, but the very fact that this operation took place and the aircrafts took off would have taken place under the presumption that this operation could be carried out, our aircrafts were safe in Indian airspace. Right. So either we did not understand Pakistan's inclination to retaliate, or we did not understand the weaponry that they possessed and its capability. Both point to a direct intelligence failure, and it brings us back to what is the protagonist of our conversation today, Ajit Doval and the intelligence setup. That whatever happened was a major intelligence disaster, that our aircrafts could be targeted in our airspace by Chinese weapons in this effective a manner could only have been done if we did not anticipate this. And that anticipation is not simply a military problem, it's an intelligence problem, which actually takes us back to the genesis of this whole conflict. Pahalgam itself and what happened in Pahalgam is an intelligence failure, isn't it?
No, definitely. Pahalgam is an intelligence failure. And also, let's not forget that Mr. Doval is seen as the Pakistan expert in this setup. He is the Pakistan expert, he is the Punjab expert, he is the Kashmir expert, because of where he comes from. The fact that he served in Pakistan is seen as a big plus to his credentials. And for him, for the Pakistan policy over the last 11 years, and please do not forget, Hartosh, that he is the only official or political leader who has been constant in his position in last 11 years. Amit Shah was not the Home Minister in first tenure. Rajnath was not there. Jaishankar was not there. No one else, not even the Principal Secretary, Nripen Mishra, no one else. He is the only constant figure who stayed as NSA throughout. And Pakistan is precisely his domain, and Kashmir is his domain. Now, when you start talking about doing stuff in Balochistan, as Mr. Doval has proclaimed with his Doval Doctrine, the speeches, etc., which have come out, which he spoke about earlier, you essentially tell the West that Pakistan is doing to Kashmir, you are doing it in Balochistan, so there is an equivalence. You negate what Pakistan has done, what Pakistan is doing in Kashmir. So it's a larger failure of thinking, a larger failure of approach, a larger failure of dealing, and it goes beyond intelligence, because he's in some sense moved even beyond intelligence. He's moved in terms of strategic thinking, in terms of internal security picture, and Kashmir particularly, because we saw pictures of him having biryani when Article 370 was removed in 2019, and thereafter, as you said, what we have seen in Pahalgam, despite the removal of Article 370, despite demonetization, because the first time they said that militancy is over in Kashmir was demonetization. Then they said surgical strikes have done it. Then they said the Balakot strikes have done it. Then Article 370 removal. All these things have happened, but we still have a Pahalgam-like attack.
Well, so two things, and I think you've already pointed to this, that one is the nitty-gritty of intelligence. In Pahalgam, that failed. And clearly, it has failed since we still don't know who carried out the Pahalgam attack.
Yes.
There is one claim by an agency. The Indians have not provided, this government has provided no direct proof or named anybody involved in the attack. We don't know the modalities, we don't know how it was carried out. If Pakistan is to blame, how was it responsible for this attack? That's the nitty-gritty that comes directly under Doval. But Doval has also been given this surprising position, which is almost unprecedented in a policeman being given charge of sort of larger conceptual variables of policy, of decision making. And in Kashmir, I think you see it right from the beginning, from 2014 onwards, as you have pointed out, that Kashmir had already been going a certain way based on Doval's own thinking. And we've seen actually that lead to a worsening of the situation in Kashmir till 2012, 13, 14. I'm not talking about what the popular mood in Kashmir was. It's always been, for good reason, against the center, against Indian sentiments. But in terms of violence in Kashmir, there was a containment, it was coming down, and that ever since the proactive policy of Doval and this government has escalated from the Burhan Wani case to 370 to the kind of anger and sullenness that sits quietly in the valley. And if this government was so sure of succeeding in Kashmir, right of the attack, we have reported in great deal. The torture, the killing of our own citizens by our military being carried out itself is indicative of where we stand today in this case. How have we reached this misjudgment? Because in 2014, one of the important points was to try and make sure that we see an improvement in the security situation. That certainly is not true of Kashmir.
No, definitely. And Hartosh, you spoke about the torture, etc. The region in which these tortures have happened is essentially in the Rajouri Punch area, and in those areas, essentially it happened because the Rashtriya Rifles was pulled out immediately and had to be moved to China border on eastern Ladakh. And China is something again where Mr. Doval is the special representative, and he's the longest serving special representative of the Prime Minister, whether from the Chinese side, whether from Chinese side or from the Indian side. There's been nobody who has served as a special representative for such a long time. And after 11 years as special representative, what we got on China? China is withdrawing 300 engineers from Apple. It is not supplying rare earths to us. It is not supplying fertilizers to us. On the eastern Ladakh border, Indian soldiers cannot still reach those areas where they could patrol before May 2020. The deployments which were there, the additional deployments, those continue to remain in eastern Ladakh. The Chinese have not conceded anything on those. And now you have this scene where the Chinese have aggressively come out and criticized you on the Dalai Lama issue. When somebody no less than the Prime Minister wishes Dalai Lama on his 90th birthday, the Chinese spokesperson in the embassy here in Delhi actually goes out and says stuff, and even against former diplomats and other strategic thinkers who have tried to say that there is a Tibet card. The Chinese have actually come out on all three issues, on the economy and trade issue, on the border issue, and on the Tibet issue. They have actually taken such a strong position. But Indian leaders, Indian political leaders, Misri had gone there, Rajnath has gone there, Jaishankar has gone there, Doval himself has gone there, and a couple of months' time, Modi will be going there to China. So where does the China policy lie? Especially if Mr. Doval heads the China study group, is also dealing with China, while also he's seen as the Pakistan expert. Where does this lie?
One of the things that you're pointing out to is who, after all, is running policy. And this is a confusion that exists right through the tenure of the Modi government. The kind of roles that were designated for Jaishankar and Doval, external clarity is not present there at all. It is not just us as journalists, it is also senior figures in this government itself. It's also senior diplomats outside this country. Yeah. Nobody is clear where Doval begins and where Jaishankar ends, or the other way around. But more and more it is clear that Jaishankar is the mouthpiece, and in some ways in the neighborhood and outside, some of whatever passes for a strategic vision is Doval's doing.
No, actually, Hartosh, I will butt here, because this is something which a European country which India considers as a strategic partner. One of their diplomats actually told me, because I thought that Europe, etc., would be handled by the MEA. They said no. Even we know that even Europe is handled more by the NSA's office than by the External Affairs Minister.
And this decision making leaves him the most powerful figure in terms of policy and strategic thinking. This is a man who's about to turn 80. The RSS is talking about people retiring at 75.
Hartosh, he was born when the Second World War was still on. We are talking about a man who was born when the Second World War was still on. We are talking about Second World War, Cold War getting over, China's rise. The world has changed dramatically. He's that old. He's 80 years old. And on China, I think particularly the failure has been galling, because this fact that China is going to be the strategic challenge, major strategic challenge, which you have to deal with, whether when you deal with Pakistan or you deal with China per se, or you form ties with the United States, has been known to all of us. It is not a secret. And 11 years is a good enough time for us to judge people on what they have done. And linked to China is what we have seen in South Asia. India has essentially lost South Asia. India has lost Bangladesh. India has lost Nepal. India almost lost Maldives. What is going on?
And it is losing mostly to China in some senses. By default, places where, at least in the neighborhood, India could have claimed some kind of approach success has fallen out. We have never been in this position. You are talking of Vishwaguru, world power. No country of this stature is surrounded by a ring of hostility, which is its own creation. It's not just that you have a problem on the boundary with China, you have a problem in every major neighborhood with China. And that includes Nepal, you have Sri Lanka, and you have Bangladesh.
So there are two parts to it. One is the Chinese influence in the region, which is, of course, China is a much bigger power. It has got more money to spend, the BRI and so on and so forth. And the second is the way the Indian state has been deploying its policies, whether it is in terms of using people, using intelligence agencies for interfering in politics, for taking very staunch pro-Hindutva ideological positions, whether in Bangladesh, whether in Afghanistan, on visa, on other issues where you call Bangladeshis termites, or on Nepal, the way blockades have been done, or the way RAW operatives operate inside Kathmandu, where you've been to Kathmandu and the people hate them for what they do there. So it has been a failure at many levels. But essentially, the point that you are making and that I completely agree with is that Doval is at the center of that policy making, of that strategic thinking, whether it is on Pakistan, on China, or or within the neighborhood. And not only just the neighborhood, Myanmar is blowing up. Afghanistan blew up recently. Pakistan is an internal challenge. Bangladesh is a challenge, and then you have Manipur.
So, see, and we'll come to Manipur. One of my questions, which has always been in my mind, is that why does Doval get so much importance? And I think one of the things that we must realize is there is a great deal of synchronicity between Modi and Doval in how they see themselves and see the world. The chest-thumping aggression built on hype and propaganda without actually backing it up with the kind of capability that would actually allow that kind of boast is common to Modi and to Doval. And I think it is what allows Modi to trust Doval in that same sense, because he sees this shared visibility. And in Doval you also see the other things which are responsible for this mess, which is that he shares. And I think there's been a great profile in the Caravan by Praveen Dhonti where we have discussed this in detail. He shares this sense of Hindu victimization over centuries. That already blinds you to the reality of today's world. And when you operate from that lens, you are not talking about strategic interests of India as a country, but you are talking of historical invented grievances and mythology. Even as you're pointing out to Manipur, the assessment and the judgment of what was going on locally, to pick sides based on what seems a similar kind of connection, is one of the reasons for the mess that we have there.
No, and not to be able to not bring the mess under control after more than 2 years. Hartosh, in which other Indian state in the last 75 years have you lost more than 6,000 weapons from state armories and they have not returned? Barely, I think a couple of thousand have returned. Where have mortars been used? Where have central paramilitary forces been used to create a border between two kinds of people within your own state? The authority of the Indian state has completely vanished. The principal secretary of the state has been changed 3 or 4 times in last 2 years. You can't find a good bureaucrat to run the show. What is going on? And let's not forget, this is the government which in 2014 or 2015 signed the Naga Accord. Where is the Naga Accord now? Mr. Doval was sitting there on the top signing the Naga Accord with the Nagas. The Naga Accord is nowhere. And as you know, as Praveen had reported in the Caravan, the question of can we give more autonomy and more freedom to a Christian majority state was essentially that was the point on which it blocked. NSA and is on record saying that a Hindutva government didn't want to give more freedom to this. So the idea of your ideology or your belief system actually overruling what is good for the country or what is good for the people clearly seems to be visible in what we have seen, and this is something which we saw with the farmers' protest as well.
So I think the actual challenges that you see, the personality that we are dealing with, is of a typical bully. He will want to force things, but when there is somebody standing up, then you recede and become something else entirely because you do not have the capability. This actually has been visible consistently both in the BJP and Doval. What happened in Pahalgam, what's happening with Pakistan, the declaration, goes back to one big incident. I was that night reporting in Amritsar when the IC-814 was hijacked. We will not go into details here, but people should go back and report that when the plane actually gets hijacked, what the intelligence setup in Delhi was doing. It took them 3 hours to coordinate, to sit down and start reacting to a crisis which should have been responded to in 5 minutes. On the ground in the airport, there was complete confusion of 5 different people talking to 5 different people on the ground. And then you let the plane go to Kandahar. And then there's a negotiating team that goes there. And who's the man who negotiates with the hijacker? It is our Mr. Doval, who eventually agrees to the release of Masood Azhar. That beginning and that whole arc starts with our chest-thumping, proactive man actually giving up and letting go of something. And Doval was part of that whole crisis. You can see this over and over again with the farm movement. You see bullying attempt to push, to intimidate, then to try and spin it into one kind of facet of Khalistani. We will return to how in Punjab Doval has always gone back to the past with invented grievances to carry out his policy. But that's what happened with the farm protests, the spin into Khalistan, and then eventually giving way when you are realizing this is getting to be an actual security problem when you had no need to create one in some sense.
But what is this obsession with Punjab and Khalistan? Khalistan is not an issue in India anymore.
Yeah.
Why this obsession with Punjab and Khalistan?
I mean, I think it is an 80-year-old man living in the past. Yeah, I mean, quite seriously, I mean it.
Yeah.
Where else do you understand this from? A movement in 2014 which had vanished when you called for a referendum, 5 people turned up, nobody was paying it attention. Today is alive and well and thriving abroad because the Modi government has made it come alive, not people outside, not support from outside. The constant attention, the constant vilification, the constant need to create this attention is part of this whole
Paranoia? Paranoia?
Paranoia also. Doval's whole, the cult of Doval that has been created in the media, and I think Praveen again had a very interesting piece on the security. The cult of Doval has been created by the very people who stand most to gain by creating the cult of Doval. You know, I mean, it is no coincidence that if you read about Doval's exploits, the journalists who are quoted in saying these were his exploits are people like Nitin Gokhale, Saika Datta, etc. And we all know what that means and what that reflects, quite honestly. You know? And so, because of this whole living in the past, living with an assessment of what was a security threat once, also the spin of myth of wandering around in the Golden Temple where bullets were flying when almost everybody rules out the possibility. I think all this is still alive in a mind which has not caught up with what has really happened in Punjab since.
Yeah. Also, I would think, Hartosh, that he might have been a very good operative at a slightly lower level, at a tactical level, running operations, whether in the Golden Temple or dealing on the Pakistan desk. But that is very different from the job at a very higher strategic level, where you are perhaps the most important person formulating foreign policy, formulating security strategy, dealing with other leaders. You know, holding back channel talks with Pakistan, inviting ISI to come to Pathankot to investigate. You are taking serious decisions. You are dealing with the US on technology issues. That is very different from what you do at a slightly lower level as an operative. You know, I don't know what he was in Punjab, maybe an SP at that time or SSP at that time. That would be probably his rank at that point in time.
See, the question is, we can never tell for sure what really happened. Everybody denies the possibility of the spin that is given to him being in Golden Temple. It's like his being in Pakistan. He was part of the embassy. The story that has been sold is that he was for 7 years undercover in Pakistan. How can your son is going to school? Everybody knows who you are. We know, you know how embassies function. Everybody knows he was the intelligence operative there. The Pakistanis knew they'll let him wander around for 7 years underground. I mean, this kind of nonsensical myth that has been created. That is why I say the familiarity with Modi is exactly this. Around Modi, you see similar nonsensical. He was fighting crocodiles when he was young. Doval was fighting these mythical Pakistani crocodiles when he was old, or whatever it was.
So, how long will Mr. Doval continue to remain in the post? He's, as we said, you know, as I said, he was born when even Second World War was going on. He's 80-year-old. RSS talks about 75, as you said. So, how long will he continue in this post, and who can he replace with? Are there no replacements? Is there no one Mr. Modi trusts to replace Mr. Doval?
Well, when things go wrong, he doesn't get replaced. It is somebody else who gets replaced, and I think that is what takes us to, I mean, we talked of Pakistan and Punjab and this, and we talked of this chest-thumping and proactive policy. I think it is worth going into what has happened in Canada and the US and then see who actually suffered the bout of what is. I think it is this whole obsession with Khalistan that leads you to enter places like Canada and the USA. Now, who is Niger? Niger is not an important man. In what ways he is security threat in India? I mean, unless the Modi government feels the shame of having to withdraw in front of the farm protest. Do you have any major incident over the last 15 years of security threats by the Khalistanis? Nothing in India. Did Niger run some kind of operation in India? Did he have any capability? We have none of that. Then that idiot Pannu, that good for nothing.
Pannu is a real idiot. Even journalists were not taking his call.
Nobody takes him seriously.
Nobody brings it.
Except for the Modi government.
Yeah, and they build him up actually.
They built him. So then you have another assassination attempt in the US.
In New York.
In New York.
Of all places.
How do you, and maybe you may have a better right, how do you, when you as a professional agency decide to run an operation, because by now we know that somebody from India was involved, they've been named, you go and recruit an American DEA agent.
Yeah. And so even if the political leadership had passed these orders, as a renowned intelligence professional who has been hailed so much in Indian media, it was his job to put his foot down and say, no, this cannot be done. This is a question, if you agree to the political leadership asking you to do this, whoever the political leader was, whether number 1 or number 2 or number 3, the fact of the matter is that as an intelligence professional, as somebody who has done it, seen it all, you should have put your foot down. The fact you did not put your foot down, allow these kind of, embarrassments to happen, should have been reason enough for him to be actually sacked. Forget his cognitive decline, forget his age, forget Pakistan, forget Manipur, forget Kashmir. That Canada and US should by itself have been serious enough. In no other democracy could that NSA have survived this thing. Nowhere in the world people survive like this.
You see the coming together of rhetoric. Ghar mein jaake marenge, both Doval and Modi are the only two people saying this. And you see the consequences of doing this nonsense. Eventually, it achieved nothing. You were going after, forget the whole ethical perspective on this.
Yeah.
Look at it only from a security viewpoint. What were you hoping to gain?
Absolutely.
Nothing. But what did you lose? And I think it would be good to come to some sort of conclusion on what we lost in terms of our interactions with the US, with Canada, Australia, the Five Eyes, whatever it was.
Yeah. So we lose intelligence sharing. People don't trust you. You lose certain credibility globally. You lose the kind of relationships that you have cultivated, and you get the image of a rogue state. Which are the other countries who do this? There is Russia. There is Pakistan. There is Israel. And then there is India. Do you really want to be in the company of these states when you are dealing with? And especially when your selling point is that we are the world's biggest democracy and I am so and so and I'm so great, then you want to be friends with these countries. You can't be friends with China, of course, for very obvious reasons. Or do you want to be friends with Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, whatever? Do you want to be on that side of the world? So those are the kind of questions which remain. But I'm sure, Hartosh, you and I can talk about is his cognitive decline can be whispered in Delhi, and people can talk about other issues. But as our colleague Surbhi was saying, there are movies which are being made in Bollywood now, which are supposed to be loosely based on his life. The movie is probably called Dhurandhar or something.
One of the things that is said is, if you're really a leader, the buck stops with you. Now, who got it on the neck for what went wrong in Canada and US was his own protege Samant Goel, who was the raw chief. Yeah, so you pass the buck on to your next man, and you get a movie made where you create a myth.
Yeah.
I think the movie should be called Dhurandhar or Dud, basically, and that's really the summing up of Doval and his disastrous decade in power.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Hartosh. It has been quite a disastrous decade. As at the end of the 11th year, we can clearly see that, and not only domestically but also regionally and larger globally. It has not been the best decade that India has had. I think let's end on that note. If we both agree on that, let's
Doval the Dud.
Doval the Dud, not the Dhurandhar. Thank you so much. Thank you.